Hello and welcome to this presentation in relation to a flipped classroom at Melton Christian College. We welcome you to work through our presentation with us during this session. I will now start a PowerPoint presentation for you to view as we talk. Today's lesson, we are looking at the curriculum for your child's studies on religion and society. My name is Fiona Meager and I will be teaching your children religion and society this year. Religion and society is a VCE subject. It is scored, which means it actually, the results of their assessments go towards their final ATAR score. What is a flipped classroom? We see using the flipped classroom approach as a way to deliver the content to students and better use our class time. The lectures will be loaded to our school Canvas page for students to view prior to the allocated classes. Essentially, the strategy is that the teacher would record the lesson and load it to our system for students to watch before they come into our class. In comparison to the way in which we traditionally run a classroom where we lecture in front of the room. Why would we use a flipped classroom? Some of the reasons that we've taken this approach is because a flipped classroom speaks the language of today's digital students. It helps busy students, it helps struggling students, and I'll elaborate on that in saying that struggling students can view the video more than once. They can understand the teaching by taking it piece by piece and making notes rather than just hearing it once. They help students of all abilities excel. It allows students to pause and rewind their teacher, increases student and teacher interaction because during class time we have more time to sit with one another and actually work through any of the issues the individual child may be having. It allows the teachers to know their students better. It increases student to student interaction within our classroom. It allows for real differentiation. It changes our classroom management, and flipping changes the way we're able to talk to you. We see some of the benefits of a flipped classroom as the fact that students have greater control of their learning. It promotes student-centered learning and collaboration, which is a life skill that they need to learn. Lessons and content are made more accessible, provided there is tech access. It's easier for parents to see what's going on. You have the ability to log into our system and view these also, and it can be more efficient. Some of the limitations that we see is that it can create a digital divide between students. It relies on preparation and trust. We must trust that our students are watching these lectures. There's significant work on the front end. We need to record these before each of the lessons. And the students also need additional time to view them, and time in front of the screens instead of people increases. So where will these things be stored? Most of you are already aware of our school's online system, Canvas. Students, parents and teachers all have access to Canvas. It's an online system that we load information and content from our classes. We also have an assignment area for students to view and lodge assessments. We encourage parent involvement with their child's learning. We ask that parents are actively reviewing the Canvas page and discussing the topics of our classes. The assessment for this subject will be collected in a range of ways. I will make observations through classroom discussions. Students will also complete worksheets for multiple learning areas. Students will be required to complete a case study assessment for each unit outcome, and at the end of the semester there will be an exam. All results of students' assessments will be loaded to our Canvas page for you to view. In relation to the safe use of ICT here at our college, communication is intended for building and nurturing community. So at our school, students learn how to use information, communication and technology constructively and responsibly. The following is a list of protocols based on our core values that students use information and communication technology correctly. We are a Christ-centered community. We use ICT in ways that show love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness in ourselves, and that also brings out the characteristics in others. We look for excellence. We use ICT in ways that support our own and others' enthusiasm for excellence in schoolwork. We carefully look after our ICT hardware, and we use ICT in ways that minimise environmental waste. We look at respect. We use ICT in ways that are obedient to teachers and that are lawful. We look at community. We use ICT in ways that nurture people and protect their identity, including ourselves. And we have a passion for teaching and learning. So we use ICT in ways that are for schoolwork and for learning about material related to schoolwork topics. There are rewards and consequences to the use of ICT. The rewards for using ICT is uninterrupted learning, cyber connection, enriched understanding, knowledge and wisdom, cyber safety, and the opportunity to enhance one's own teaching and learning. The consequences of using ICT is that your learning will be interrupted. There'll be damaged learning as teachers may need to confiscate devices, coordinators may need to block access, and in more serious matters, it'll be referred to the principal, which may result in detention, suspension, or possibly the expulsion of a student. Now let's take some time to have a look at a flipped classroom in our Religion and Societies unit. Welcome students. This is Mrs. Meager speaking, and in today's lesson for Religion and Society, we are looking at the area of Study 1, the nature and purpose of religion. Outcome 1 requires us to, on completion of this unit, students should be able to discuss the nature and purpose of religion and explain the aspects of religion. What is religion? Religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal God or gods. The 6 main religious traditions are Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and Indigenous traditions. Today we're actually going to look deeper into Indigenous traditions. Australia has 2 Indigenous people, Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders. It is not possible to speak of one Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander religion, as there are many. There are, however, shared cultural traits, economic and ceremonial dealings, and a customary system of land tenure laws. It is misleading to try and separate Australian Indigenous religion experiences from other aspects of their life, culture, and history. It is also difficult to speak of origin because an Indigenous concept of time connects past actions and people with present and future generations. Time is circular, not linear, as each generation relives the dreaming activities. Although Indigenous belief and culture practices vary according to region, all groups share a common worldview that the land and other natural phenomena possesses living souls. The collection of stories of these powerful beings and the knowledge represented in these stories shape Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander law, both its history and future. Indigenous traditions believe the earth is eternal, and so are the many ancestral figures, beings who inhabit it. These beings are often associated with particular animals, for example, kangaroo men, emu men, and bowerbird women. As they journeyed across the face of the earth, these powerful beings created human, plant, and animal life, and they left traces of their journey in the natural features of the land. They also connected particular groups of people with particular regions and languages. Some groups hold a belief in a supreme being. The dreaming continues to control the natural world. Aboriginal spirituality doesn't have any sacred texts or writings. They do, however, have important stories which have been passed down through their history. A major story from the Aboriginal people is the story of how the world was created. They believed it was created by the dreaming spirit known as the rainbow serpent. The rainbow serpent is known of by many different Aboriginal groups. Dreaming or dream time are English words that describe a rich Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander concept. In reality, it is impossible to find words that adequately capture the core elements of who they are, but it's something they feel when we sit with them on our country and hear our stories with an open mind and heart. Dreaming is more than a mythical past. It prescribes the connections Aboriginal people have with the spiritual essence of everything around them and beyond them. Dreaming stories are not in the past, they are outside of time, always present and giving meaning to all aspects of life. Across Australia, we use different words for this concept, including, I'm not sure how to pronounce all of these, but it's Tjukurpa, spelt Tjukurpa in Central Australia, Bugari, spelt Bugari in Broome, and Wonga, spelt Wongar in northeast Arnhem. Many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people prefer the use of the word dreaming over dreamtime. The dreaming is passed from generation to generation through stories, song, dance, and art. The knowledge gives us special responsibility as it is seen as a great honour. For example, Aboriginals believe that when they are taught a story or song about the travel of ancient creation spirits and ancestors from waterhole to waterhole, we become the holder of this essential knowledge. The concept of Aboriginal dreaming has been described as the veil separating physical life from existence outside of physical life is far less distinct and far more preamble than that experienced by non-Indigenous Australians. The collective knowledge and wisdom of the grandparent and great-grandparents in their living state are absorbed into the collection resource bank when they pass on through death. Land rights for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people refers to the ongoing struggle to gain legal and moral recognition of ownership of lands and waters they call home prior to colonisation of Australia in 1788. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, laws and customs and ways of knowing and being in the world are connected to the land and waters. Connections to land is therefore essential to the continued cultural survival of Indigenous Australians, as well as their economic and social development. The modern land right movements date back to 1963, when the Yolngu people from the settlement Yirrkala in northern East Arnhem, or known as Northern Territory, presented the Australian Parliament with a bark petition commonly known as the Yirrkala Bark Petitions, protesting to have their land and their rights returned. Then in 1971, the Yolngu people again petitioned the government in the case of Millerumpen and versus Nabucco Proprietary Limited, commonly known as the Grove Land Rights case, this time about mining activity taking place on their land without their consent. The Northern Territory Supreme Court acknowledged the Yolngu people's ongoing relationship with the land and the complex systems of laws used by the people to govern the land, but lost the case because the Australian courts were still bound by discriminatory legal practices that denied Indigenous people had laws and rights in relation to land. During this era, the Wave Hill Walk-Off also took place. In August 1966, Vincent Lingari of Gurindjinji tribe led his people to strike for better working and pay conditions on a cattle station owned by a British pastoral company in the Northern Territory. The strike soon grew to be about more than working conditions, with Lingara insisting the lands they were working on was the land of his people and demanded it to be returned. After the struggle and the lobbying, Lingari was formally given back the land by Prime Minister of Australia Gough Whitlam in 1972. Following the failure of the Grove Lands Rights case, the Whitlam Labor government insisted an inquiry into Aboriginal land rights, which eventually led to the Fraser Liberal government passing the Aboriginal Land Rights Act 1976. The Australian government started purchasing private property land from the early 1970s. The purchases were made to benefit Indigenous communities and allow certain Crown land to be made available for claim. The Aboriginal Lands Right Northern Territory Act 1976 has resulted in almost 50% of Northern Territory land being returned to Aboriginal people. After decades of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people struggling to find a foundation for land ownership and rights, the High Court rejected the notion that Australia belonged to no one before British settlement in Mabo and others versus Queensland No. 2. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation rejoiced that the High Court in Australia finally recognised that Indigenous people had lived in Australia for thousands of years and enjoyed rights to their land according to their land laws and customs. The Native Titles Act 1983 also established the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Land Fund and the Indigenous Land Corporation to assist Indigenous people in buying and maintaining land. This is a picture of Vincent Lingari famously giving back Gurindjinji tribe lands by Prime Minister Gough Whitlam. Ritual ceremonies involving special sacred sites, song cycles accompanied by dance and body paint and even sports invoked these mythical and living beings and continue to provide the meaning to access the spiritual powers and the dreaming. At important stages of men and women's lives, ceremonies are held to seek the assistance of spiritual beings. This makes them direct participants in the continuing process of the dreaming. Other ceremonies are known to increase rites in which the willingness of ancestral beings to release the land's fertility depends upon humans continuing to perform certain rituals. Recent years have seen major Indigenous Festivals emerge. Some of these are listed on your slide. Between 1910 and 1970, many Indigenous children were forcibly removed from their families as a result of various government policies. The generations of children removed under these policies became known as the stolen generation. The policies of child removal left a legacy of trauma and loss that continues to affect Indigenous communities, families, and individuals. The forcible removal of Indigenous children from their family was part of the policy of assimilation. Assimilation was based on the assumption of Black inferiority and white supremacy, which supposed that Indigenous people should be allowed to die out through a process of natural elimination, or where possible should be assimilated into a white community. Children taken from their parents as part of the stolen generation were taught to reject their Indigenous heritage and forced to adopt white culture. The names were changed and they were forbidden to speak their traditional language. Some children were adopted by white families and many were placed in institutions where abuse and neglect were common. Assimilation policies focused on children who were considered more adaptable to white society than Indigenous adults. Half-caste children, a term now considered derogatory for people of Aboriginal and white parentage, were particularly vulnerable to removal because authorities thought these children could be assimilated more easily into the white community due to their lighter skin colour. What has been done about this? In 1995, the Australian government launched a major inquiry into the policy of forcible child removal. The report was delivered to Parliament on the 26th of May 1997. It estimated that between 10% and 33% of all Indigenous children were separated from their families between 1910 and 1970. The report, Bringing Them Home, acknowledged the social values and standards of the time, but concluded that the policies of children removal breached fundamental human rights. The Keating government commissioned the inquiry into the stolen generation, but the Howard government received the report. Howard's government was sceptical of the report's finding and largely ignored its recommendations. When Kevin Rudd came into power in 2007, he promised to deliver a national apology to the stolen generation. This promise was fulfilled on the 13th of February 2008. I have attached here a portion of Kevin Rudd's apology speech. This has also been loaded to our Canvas page. I ask you to stop the presentation now and please take some time to reflect on the following. Scott Darlow is a well-known Aboriginal speaker and musician. The song Solid Rock is a song written by Shane Howard and recorded by Australian band Goanna. In this video, Scott plays Solid Rock with Shane Howard. Listen to the words and reflect on the meaning of this song. Attached here is a worksheet for you to complete. This has also been loaded to our school's Canvas page. Please take the time to work through this before our class and we will work through it as a collective group. Think about any questions you may have on this topic and have them ready for our next discussion.